Hello and welcome back to my creative endeavors. Today I got a fun one to show you. So, last week I made a video about that time when I turned Bart Simpson into several different things, and that made me very nostalgic about doing such drawings. So I decided to turn this into a series and do another one. This time I picked Super Mario, and these were the variations I came up with. Let's just check this quick reel I did for Instagram, and after that I'll explain how I came up with these ideas. So, before I begin rambling about how I spent almost 13 hours doing these drawings, let me just properly introduce this concept. Basically, I grab a known character and I do a reference drawing from one that already exists. After that, I give it a bit of my own touch, and then all the variations I do grow from there. Sometimes I turn the reference into a different character all along, and other times I just turn him into an alternate version of itself, but always keeping the same foundation, so to speak. With that being said, when it comes to Mario, I did exactly that. I grabbed an image of him doing very classic and basic Super Plumber stuff, like jumping, smiling and displaying his very glamorous mustache to the world, and I just traced the main lines I wanted to use in my piece. After I get what I call rough lines, which are just basic lines with zero variation in thickness, I do something that helps elevate the cartoony vibe of the drawing. I transform the profile of every single line, and this is usually when I play around with said lines to achieve what I really want with them. This is something I really like about drawing with vectors. You can always change every line to a point where you don't even need to know how to draw. After a bit of tedious work, I got the base Mario I wanted, and here you can see the difference between what I call rough lines and the lines with different profiles. But these lines aren't the final ones because some of them overlap and sometimes I make mistakes and some shapes have gaps in them, so I have to fix all of that shit. Usually I expand the lines to turn them from strokes into objects to make this process easier, and it also helps me when it comes to painting. Oh, and I also decided to draw a mushroom to kinda add more personality to each drawing by giving me another element that I could shapeshift to fit my needs. After that, all that was left to do was the coloring. I usually do this in a pretty easy way. I use the live bucket tool to turn all the enclosed spaces into shapes that can receive color, and that is why it's so important to do all the line treatment process that I do. For this, I usually tend to stick to the original color scheme, and I only change minor things if I think some colors don't match the others or if they stand out too much or less than they should. And that is it, a regular Super Mario ready to be abused and turned into whatever I feel like. And the first thing that came to my mind was to turn him into Luigi and Wario. This way, I would have two easy targets that would require few changes, or so I thought. I went into this thinking, oh okay, so Luigi and Wario just have different mustaches and colors, so this is going to be so easy. But of course it was not like that, mostly because of Wario, but we'll get to that. Starting with Luigi, it required few changes, yes, but that never means that something is going to be easy. I changed the hat and the mustache as obvious steps, but when I sent it to a friend to show what I was doing, he told me, oh, why don't you do something more related to his games? You do know that he has his own games, don't you? And honestly, I didn't. But that ended up being a very good thing because it allowed me to turn him from this into this. I did his Ghostbuster type machine that is basically a vacuum cleaner with a lantern on the tip, and I also turned the mushroom into a little ghost. And I thank my friend for giving me this tip because otherwise from all of these, Luigi would have been the most boring variation for sure. But I followed the same process. Draw lines, expand them into objects, erase the lines I don't need, define shapes with the live bucket tool, and apply colors. For Wario, things were not so easy. He has a lot of tiny details that make him very distinct from Mario. And I'm not just talking about the fact that he is fatter and also more buff, which is weird by itself. But I guess the takeaway from this project was that I understood that Luigi is just lazy character design and Wario isn't. And these things are also very fun and useful to me because they help me understand that a few tweaks in some lines can make for a huge difference in the final piece, and that you can essentially create a new character just by changing very few things. But Wario, for some reason I don't know, he has very small pupils, so I took care of that first because I wanted to start with the face. Also, he has a very weird swollen nose that makes it look like he was stung by a bee and he is allergic or something. I don't know. I'm not here to judge. I am just pointing it out because I never noticed this before until I spent a couple hours looking at him. Anyway, the mustache was surprisingly easy to do and I managed to be satisfied with my first attempt. The same cannot be said about the mouth, teeth and the eyebrows, because these were steps that took me an awful amount of time to get right. And the eyebrows still ended up wrong. He looks more scared than scary, but that's what I get for trying to make everything like the reference. Sometimes I redesign some stuff because I think I can do better than the original one, and this is one of the times I should have done that. But first I took care of some other stuff, like these little curls on his hair and his weird elf-looking pointy ears, and then I went to the eyebrows. I'm not going to waste a lot of our time with this, but the problem is that the drawing I was looking at had this weird curve to the eyebrows. And usually angry eyebrows are slanted, yes, but this weird curve kind of goes against that and makes our brain not perceive the same expression. We are kind of biologically triggered by some signs and we naturally connect them to emotions. That's why this feels so weird to look at. But anyway, I took a deep breath and I moved on to something else. His clothing has some minor changes that needed to be done, so I took care of that and I decided not to make him fat, just like I didn't make him skinny as Luigi, just because this is Mario transformed into them. And if I did those characteristics, then it would stop being Mario and ending up just being Luigi and Wario. And that's just not the style I want for this overall concept. I still gave Mario more pronounced biceps, just because Wario has less lines in his clothing and I wanted to fill the empty space with something of value. After that I moved on to his weird ass gnome elf shoes that, besides being weird, are supposed to have the pants tucked in, so this required a bit of tweaking here and there. But I think that in the end the result was not that awful to look at. To further amplify the evil vibe, I decided to turn the mushroom into kind of a gangster, made him angrier and dressed as if he was ready to steal something. I guess in my mind every robber wears a beanie. And since I gave Luigi a ghost vacuum cleaner, I decided to give Wario a bag to carry coins. I might not know a lot about Luigi and his lore, but I do remember that Wario was always stealing coins and he usually had this like Santa Claus bag filled with them. So this is it. And this is definitely one segment that represents so well the amount of time I spend doing details that people don't even see in the final image. That's something I've been working a lot in my work, but sometimes I just get lost in the creative void and I don't think properly. I just draw. And that's pretty much it for Wario. After that I erased the extra bits of lines I didn't need and I finally gave him some colors. This was really a delayed gratification because he took so goddamn long, but worth it in the end. Except for the eyebrows though. But moving on. For the next one I took inspiration on his pose. He is punching the air, and I don't know how or why, but I thought of Saitama, the One Punch Man, and let me just brag a bit, this was such a good idea. I remember looking at him and just cracking myself just because it was looking so stupid and that made him so funny to me. And these moments are what give meaning to that cliché phrase of loving and enjoying the process. And it's true, when I'm truly loving the process, that's when all the hard shit seems so little. I decided to use the original Mario suspenders to help me create the cape. I adjusted the lines and gave a more wavy cloth feel to them. After that, the more complex parts were the belt and the chest zipper, the rest was pretty straightforward. But the mushroom though, this one I really enjoyed the end result. I don't know if you are aware of this, but there's a scene in the One Punch Man series that had this specific Saitama dull expression that gave way to the creation of a meme. And I leaned on that to help me create this mushroom. But like I said, the rest was pretty straightforward. I just extended the gloves and the boots and proceeded to draw the rest of the cape. After that, the same blah blah blah. I expanded the lines to turn them into objects instead of strokes, erased the stuff I didn't need, and then bam, colors to really give this one plumber man some life. Oh, but Peach. Peach was a pain in the a-hole. Completely. It was worth it though, and coming back to what I said before, I have moments that made me enjoy the process, but still, I have to point that out. The idea doesn't stem from the position like Saitama, instead I thought of it as a challenge. I already knew it was going to be difficult given the amount of details that she has, and just because I have some trouble when it comes to drawing female characters. And dresses. But I pushed through. Again, I started with the face. Eyelashes, lipstick, small eyebrows, and a regular human nose instead of a giant potato like the one Mario has. Then for the head, I decided to use Saitama's bald head to help me get a better feel of where the hair should fall in place. I think that if I just started to draw lines without any base, it would have been much more complicated. But I'm really happy with how this turned out. When I erased the bald head and looked at the drawing from afar for the first time, I got pumped. Until this point, Peach was still that one drawing I thought I might have to scrap because I might not be able to do it, but from this point onwards I was confident I would pull this off, for better or worse. Then I focused on the dress a little bit. The more I looked at it, the more tiny details I saw that I should incorporate, and that just adds up. Peach was definitely the more complicated and complex I've done in all this character variation stuff I've been doing. But I have to be honest, the dress was hard, but not as hard as I initially thought. I looked at the reference a lot to kind of understand how to achieve the result I wanted. This is very important to me, and it's kind of a very important advice I can give you. Because let's face it, it's really easy to say I can't draw and give up. But if you really think about it, any drawing you've ever seen is just a bunch of lines. If you take some time to understand how those lines combine to form the shapes you want, you can use that to learn how to draw. And that's the thought process behind how I did a dress without knowing how to draw a dress. I also did a very pretty shoe that ended up being covered and an ugly shoe that ended up in plain sight. But at this point I just didn't care. I was going to finish this Peach no matter what. The fact that Mario, or Peach in this case, is raising a leg is what makes this a bit tricky. Because the dress can't just fall down. As I was drawing this, I had to make sure that I captured the waviness of the thing. Otherwise it would look off. For the mushroom, I went simple. I gave it a little crown, turned the circle into a heart, and cleverly used the jewel of the chest to make the ones on the crown. And since Peach also has a crown, guess what I did? I used the old copy and paste and warped it a bit to make it look like it belongs there, even though we know it doesn't. Shh. This was a lot, and I did this at like 2 a.m, so my judgment was not that great at the time, but still, I'm proud of what I got. I still had a lot of lines to erase, but when I started to color it, that's when I got the gratification I needed. And I definitely needed that gratification to push through this and try to make another one. And that one was Ash Ketchum. I think he benefits from having this victorious jump or hop, and that's why I went for that, although I had some other ideas like trying to make Mario as a Portuguese fisherman. But yeah. Peach, or Princess Mario in its full glory. Ash has gone through a couple of redesigns throughout the years, but I wanted to do the more classic Ash from the 90s. The one I remember from my childhood, basically. I started with the hat that needed to be more squared off, made that weird symbol that I don't even know what it means, but here it is. I used Peach's eyes because they were already the way I wanted them to be, and grabbed Saitama's nose because it kinda looked the same. And then I did Ash's hair. It's weird to say ashes. You get it, it's possession. It's air from ash, not ashes like ashes. Why is he called Ash though? Forget it. Then the eyebrows, which turned out great, not like the ones on Wario. The gloves were simple. They needed to be extended in the wrist part and also needed to show his fingers. I've always found these kind of gloves to be useless in real life, but again I'm a bit suspect when commenting these things because I hate to wear any kind of gloves. And I live in Portugal, so I don't know what real cold feels like. I went on to make the clothing and even stopped to make a nice tweet. But at this point I think you get it. I think you already know how I approach these steps. I draw lines and then I warp the lines and use basically every technique I know to achieve the shapes I want and carry on with my life. For the mushroom, this was also a friend's idea. He told me, why don't you draw a fungus, which is actually a mushroom Pokemon? Initially I was going to do something more basic, like turn the mushroom into Pikachu, although it would be more recognizable for the folks that know less about Pokemon. I think this idea was great and I went for it. Then I did some more details in the clothing and I tried my best to recreate Ash's sneakers, and I'm really satisfied with the end result. Then I did the obvious at this point. I erased the extra bits of lines I still had laying around and I colored the thing, achieving a pretty convincing Ash that makes me proud. Overall, I am pleased with the results. These projects always surprise me. I never do any drafts or sketches, so when I look at the final thing I'm always stoked by the fact that this was something I did. And that's it! Super Mario in 6 variations. This was very fun to do, and since I didn't do any kind of shadows, I'm definitely going to grab these drawings and put them through Photoshop to see if I can get some cool results. Subscribe if you want to see a video about that in the near future. Also, if you have any ideas for characters you want to see in this series, comment down below or send me a message on Instagram. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you in the next video.